Hi guys, in this lesson we're going to test asynchronous and synchronous invocation from the command line using the AWS CLI. I'm in the Lambda console and I'm on the dashboard. You can also be under functions. And what you want to do is click on create function. Now there's a few options here. You can author from scratch, you can use a blueprint, and there's a whole load of different blueprints for various functions that will include the function code. You can use container images or the serverless application repository, which we'll look at later on in this section. What we're going to do for now is author from scratch. I'm going to call my function my test function. We then need to choose the runtime. Now I'm happy using Node.js 16.x. There's a whole load of different supported runtimes in here as well. So I'm just going to leave it on Node.js 16. For architecture, I'm happy with x86 64. Now, under permissions, your function needs permissions to call other AWS services. So there's a few different things you can do here. You can create a new role with basic Lambda permissions, use an existing role, or you can create a new role from AWS policy templates. If you use the policy templates, you'll see here we have lots of different policy templates to choose from, which give us permissions to various services. For this exercise, I'm happy creating a new role with basic Lambda permissions, and that will include the permissions that I need for Amazon CloudWatch. At the bottom, we have the advanced settings. Here you can enable code signing. You can enable a function URL so that you can assign an HTTPS endpoint. You can enable tags, and if you wanted to deploy your function to a VPC, this is where you would do it, and you need to specify the VPC and then the subnets where you will deploy it. Now, I don't want to change any of those settings, so I've left them all blank, and I'm going to create my function. Now, in this case, as we create the function, it's going to create that new IAM role for us with the permissions, and we'll go and have a look at that to make sure it's got all the permissions we need. So here is the main page for the function. Here we can see the function name in the center console. We've got triggers and destinations. We'll look at all of that in this section. And then a bit further down, you'll see there's various different panes you can go into. So here we're looking at code, and you can see the index.js code here, and this is a simple hello from Lambda function. If you go to test, we can run test events. We'll be doing that shortly. Under monitor, this is where you can actually then go across and see information in CloudWatch, view AWS X-ray traces in Service Lens. You can view Lambda insights and profiles in Code Guru. You can also see the metrics on the page here coming from CloudWatch. So the function reports the information to CloudWatch, and then we can display that information on this page. We've also got configuration. Here there's lots of different tabs for configuration. For example, let's go to permissions. If I click on permissions, we can see the role name. If we click on that, that will take us to IAM. We can see the role. We can see the trust relationships. In this case, we're allowing the Lambda service to assume the role. Under permissions, we can see that we have this policy applied. And this policy is going to allow some permissions for Amazon CloudWatch logs. In this case, we can create a log stream, and we can put event logs into that stream. Now note that this particular execution role is limited to the ARN of the actual Lambda function itself. So you can't use this with another function, because if you do, it's not going to work unless you go in and actually modify the resource ARN. Now back in Lambda, we've also then got aliases. We'll look at those a bit later on in this section, and versions. Now for this particular lesson, we're not going to change anything else. Let's come back to test here and create a new test event. I'm just going to call it T1. And I'm going to leave the default settings, which has the template hello world, and it has this event JSON. If we save that and then run test, we've now executed our function. And in the details here, we can see what the response is. So this is a successful response. A status code 200 is a success, and the body is hello from Lambda. So it's just returning that information, echoing it on the screen. Further down, we can see some information about the initialization duration, the build duration, so how many milliseconds we actually got billed for, how much memory was used, and more. And you can see the log output here. So this output is actually also going to be recorded in CloudWatch logs. So let's go over in a moment and have a look. You can see the start, the end of the request, and then the report, which also includes the build duration and that other information we just looked at. So coming back up, let's go to monitor, and in CloudWatch logs we should now have an entry. So a log group has been created, and within that log group we have this log stream, and in the log stream we can see the start, the end of the request, and then the report. So that's how we run a test event using the console. Now the purpose of this lesson is to go to the CLI, and using the CLI we're going to run some invocations synchronously and asynchronously. You'll find this file in your course download. So it's in the code directory, AWS Lambda, and it's called Invoking Functions.md. Now there's a couple of different ways we can invoke our functions synchronously. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to run AWS Lambda invoke -- function - name. I've already filled out my function name. It is called my test function. If you chose a different name for your function, make sure you update that. And then we have payload. And this is a base64 encoded string. We'll see how to create that in a moment. And then the output gets recorded in response.json. So to get this command ready, we need to get this base64 encoded payload string. Back in Lambda, on the test pane, what I'm going to do is copy this event JSON. I'm then going to go to a new tab and I'm going to search for base64. So just use Google or whatever your search engine is, and you should find this website, base64decode.org. So I click on that link, choose the encode option at the top here, so it changes to encoding our information, and then we paste the event data here and click on encode. We now get this string. So what I'm going to do is copy this base64 encoded information, which is our test event. And I'm going to paste that into my file here. So I've now got the base64 encoded information here, and I can copy this entire command to my clipboard. And on the command line, I'm going to paste in this information. In my case, I have a profile that I'm using to execute under my account. So I'm going to add that information in and then hit enter. So a status code 200 response is good. That means that our function did execute successfully. So we should have a response.json file in our directory now. And if I look into that file, this is what I get. I get that status 200 and then the body, the hello from Lambda, exactly the same result as we got when we executed the test event through the console. Back in my file, you'll see that there are other ways we can execute. So we don't necessarily have to enter the base64 encoded information. We can just give it the function name. We already have a test event anyway. So I'm going to copy this to my clipboard, and in this case I just called my out file out. So that's where the information will go. So let's paste that in. I'm going to use my profile. Let's execute the invocation, and again we get a status 200, and this time we need to go and check our out file, and we get exactly the same result. So we've synchronously invoked our function. The next test is to use the event invocation type. That causes an asynchronous invocation. So the command is the same up to that point, and then we have the -- invocation -type, and then we specify event. And then for the payload, again, we're going to use this base64 encoded information to run the same test event. So I'm just going to copy that to my clipboard, simply paste that in, and then I can copy this entire command, paste that in, and let's execute our function. Now note that this time you get a status code 202. So that is a success code, but it's indicative of an asynchronous invocation. Now we've used the same response file, so we can actually go and just open that up. And let's see, is the information any different? Well, yes, actually there is no information in this case. So with the synchronous invocation, we do have the response body returned to us. But with the asynchronous invocation, we don't. So even though the file's there, the file is actually empty. So that's how we synchronously and asynchronously invoke our functions using the command line.